Hi, Gunnar.
Hey, William.
Do you want to fill me in the chat about what the issues are?
Oh, we're okay. We just have people confused about time zones and whatnot. So I've just been letting people know when it starts in the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, I might as well just open up the slide, right?
Yeah, that would probably be great.
Hey, William. Want to fill me in the chat about what the issues are? Oh, I'm hearing myself.
Yeah, I am too. Oh, you know what? That was me with the YouTube stream open. I muted it.
Okay.
Very confused too. Okay, let me turn on your screen share.
Okay. There's that.
Okay, should work now.
You seeing the right one?
It hasn't popped up yet. There we go. Yep, that's the right one.
Okay. If you could have the link to last week's video to put in the chat at some point, that would be great.
Okay, I'll get that pulled up.
All right. I'm within ear range if you need me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Terry.
Good morning.
Hi. I didn't see you there. I thought, oh, he's yanking my chain again.
No, I was just hanging out till I got promoted.
Gotcha. All right. Very good.
It's nice though to be, retired from my main job and then still get promotions.
I
Thank you,
know.
Gunner. Thank you for promoting me, Gunner.
I'm happy to help.
All
How are you
right.
guys? How have you been?
Good. We are good. All right. I'm going to mute myself for a bit here until we are a little closer to the start time. For those of you who signed on early, you're in the right place for today's webinar, Evidence-Based Hearing Screening and Evaluation Practices for Children ages 0 to 5. And I just realized there is a typo in that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute and fix that. Did I do it correctly?
Yes, you did. That looks great.
Okay. All right. Gunnar, could you elevate Lenore to a panelist so she can communicate with us?
No problem.
Well, if you've signed on, you're in the right place for today's webinar, Evidence-Based Hearing Screening and Evaluation Practices for Children ages birth to 5 years of age. This is an introductory webinar that will be starting here at the top of the hour. That's in about 5 or 6 minutes from now. Today's webinar is going to be recorded. So if anything disrupts your full participation in our webinar today, be assured you'll be able to access this in a couple of days on our website, which is kidshearing.org. And you can also share it with other people that may not be attending live today. So once again, we'll be getting started at the top of the hour, 5 or 6 minutes from now. We do have captioning set up for today. We will post in the chat when that is ready to be activated. We're still waiting for folks to sign on, so we'll be getting started in just a few minutes. Just so that everybody who's signed on has a chance to get your audio adjusted to your liking. I'll speak for a few minutes. I'm Will Eiserman at Utah State University. This is the right place for today's webinar entitled Evidence-Based Hearing Screening and Evaluation Practices for Children ages birth to 5, Useful Facts and Practical Tools. This is an introductory webinar that will start at the very beginning for those of you who want to start there. We had a more advanced webinar that we offered last week. And so if you are needing more advanced technical assistance, we'll be posting the recorded link to that webinar in our chat field here in a moment. And we invite you to have a listen to that. We covered a lot of information for folks who are underway in implementing evidence-based hearing screening practices whether that's through the use of otoacoustic emissions or pure tone audiometry screening. Yeah, and Gunnar has posted that link in our chat where it says last week's webinar. Gunnar, would you mind posting that again? And this time noting that it is for advanced users of evidence-based screening. So as people sign on, when they see that, they'll know what that webinar was about. And I'll reference it again as well. Terry, are you with me?
I am, thank you.
Okay. Oh, there you are. I was wondering if I'd see your face today. For a moment, anyway. Let's see, we have people signing on at a fairly rapid rate right now, so we're going to just hold tight for a minute, and then we'll get started. We had well over 1,000 people register for today's webinar, which is always so gratifying to us to know that this topic is of so much interest to so many people. So we want to make sure that everybody has a good shot at starting at the very beginning, because that's where this webinar is going to start. Always start at the very beginning. That could be a musical, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, Sound of Music. So I'm going to just ramble for a minute here, just so that everybody has a chance to get their volume adjusted to their liking. This is the webinar entitled Evidence-Based Hearing Screening and Evaluation Practices for Children Ages Birth to 5 Years. Useful facts and practical tools. This webinar is brought to you by the ECHO Initiative, also known as the Early Childhood Hearing Outreach Initiative at Utah State University. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. Looks like we have our captioner here. Our good friend Lenore is back as our captioner. We always like to have Lenore as our captioner. Thank you, Lenore, for being with us today. You can activate the captioning if that's a service that you would use today by clicking on live transcript, and then you can make several adjustments once you do that. Yeah, we have people signing on really rapidly right now. So we're going to just sit tight for another 2 minutes, and then we'll get started. Gunnar, is captioning operating now?
Yes, we are up and running.
Okay. All right. Well, Terry, what do you say we get started?
Let's do it.
All right, great. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Will Eiserman, and I am the director of the Early Childhood Hearing Outreach Initiative, also known as the ECHO Initiative at Utah State University. Welcome to our webinar today, entitled Evidence-Based Hearing Screening and Evaluation Practices for Children Ages Birth to 5. Useful Facts and Practical Tools, which is code for this is an introductory webinar on evidence-based hearing screening practices. I want to alert you to the fact that we had an advanced level webinar last week, and the link to that recording is in the chat right now. During that webinar, we covered a lot of information for people who are well underway doing OAE or pure tone audiometry screening. We offered that separately so that we could delve into those questions of the more advanced people there. And today, dedicate our time and the question exchanges that we have primarily for those of you for whom evidence-based screening is new. Before we get started, I want to let you know that this webinar, like all of our webinars, is being recorded and will be posted on our website at kidshearing.org in the next couple of days. You'll also get a link to that in an email after this webinar so that you can reference that or share it with others who may not be attending live today. We know that we had a conflict with Prevent Blindness that is doing a webinar on vision screening today, and we just didn't do a very good job of coordinating ourselves. So be sure to check out their webinar recording as well over at Prevent Blindness. The ECHO initiative is housed at Utah State University within the National Center for Hearing Assessment and Management, known as NCHAM. And we are funded by the Maternal and Child Health Bureau, MCHB, as the Early Hearing Detection and Intervention National Technical Resource Center, which has focused on both newborn screening and with an increasing focus on periodic early childhood screening. And in fact, the ECHO initiative has been funded for many years, over 20 years by the Office of Head Start. We're no longer funded by the Office of Head Start, but we're delighted to be able to continue to make our resources and our other learning opportunities available to staff from Head Start programs, as well as to anyone from early care and education environments that can put these resources to use. And we'll be showing you some of those resources on our website today. If there is nothing you remember from what Terry and Terry I'll introduce in a moment, talk about today, it's this: kidshearing.org, because everything we're talking about today in varieties of forms, both video and print, can be found there. But as well as this very recording of today's webinar. So remember kidshearing.org. So I'm joined today by Terry Faust. That's Terry and me and on the slide there. I'm going to move off of that. But Terry is a pediatric audiologist who has been with the ECHO initiative as our consulting audiologist for since the very beginning. He's a pediatric audiologist and a speech language pathologist. Terry, have a hello.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, William. Yes, William and I, along with other ECHO team staff, as well as local collaborators, we've really provided training in almost every state with thousands of staff from Head Start, Early Head Start, American Indian, Alaskan Native Head Start, and Migrant Head Start, and all kinds of other early care and education programs over the years. And we're always encouraged, as we are today, by just the huge amount of interest that there is in establishing evidence-based hearing screening programs so that children with hearing-related needs can be identified and served. So thank you.
Yeah, and you know what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off my video so we can just focus on the slides and move forward. So the work of the ECHO initiative is based on the recognition that each day, young children who are deaf or hard of hearing are being served in early childhood education and healthcare settings, often without their hearing-related needs even being known. Hearing loss is often referred to as an invisible condition. So the question is, how can we reliably identify which children have what we would consider normal hearing and which may not?
And the short answer to that question really is that early care and education providers can be trained to conduct evidence-based hearing screening, exactly like you see depicted here in these photos. And the ultimate outcome of a hearing screening program is that we can identify children who are deaf or hard of hearing who have not been identified previously. So the procedure you see on the left is called otoacoustic emissions, or OAE hearing screening. And that's the recommended method for children birth to 3 years of age, and is increasingly recommended for children 3 to 5 years of age as well. On the right, you see the procedure pure tone audiometry hearing screening, and that's historically been the most commonly used screening method for children 3 years of age and older, which you'll still see in many early care and education settings and providers using. And we'll be talking about both of these methods today.
So this is William again. Let me give you a quick overview of what we want to cover today. While this presentation is not a training per se, our goal is to provide an overview of the big picture of what is involved in implementing evidence-based hearing screening for children across the age spectrum, birth to 5 years of age. And we're going to start by giving you an overview of the auditory system. That's a fancy word for the hearing system, which will help lay a foundation for understanding how the hearing screening methods we're going to be talking about today actually work. We're going to talk about why we screen for hearing loss, what even makes it possible for us to be seriously engaged in systematic screening for hearing. We're then going to talk about the two methods that Terry just talked about, OAE and pure tone audiometry, starting with an overview of the OAE screening process, followed by an overview of the pure tone screening process. Next, we'll address the important question, what do we do when a child doesn't pass a screening? We'll summarize the follow-up steps that are undertaken when a child doesn't pass a screening on one or both ears. And we're going to wrap up by showing you how to access resources to support the process of developing and maintaining your hearing screening program. And we'll open up and answer some questions you might have. Now, we're not going to try to address questions all throughout our presentation today. So please withhold from submitting questions. We may just in fact cover the question you have. But when we say, let's take questions, that'll be your cue to ask any questions we didn't have a chance to touch upon in our presentation today. All right. So that's where we're headed, and you can follow along the progression of these topics by looking at the left side of your screen. And since this is a recorded webinar, and if you're viewing it that way, you can advance forward to the topic area if you're viewing the recording to the topic that you'd like to either review again or share with others. Before we launch into our content, I want to make sure you all know where to go after today's webinar. I said at the beginning, if there's nothing you remember except one thing, it is this website, kidshearing.org, because that's where you're going to find all sorts of resources and information, including how to access training. You'll hear us say this several times today, that implementing evidence-based hearing screening practices is more than using a designated recommended piece of equipment or specific method. To implement evidence-based practices, that equipment or method needs to be used according to prescribed set of steps under carefully controlled conditions, each step of which is carefully documented in detail. And this is true whether we're talking about OAE screening or pure tone audiometry screening. As I mentioned, over the years, the ECHO initiative developed a wide array of free resources that you can access, and that helps you achieve the goal of evidence-based hearing screening. And it is so much more than just simply having the right piece of equipment. So our goal today is to primarily to help you find that information, and to make sure that right off the bat, you know what you're aiming for. So let's take a quick look at the website, kidshearing.org. We invite you to feel free to use all of these resources. And certainly before you sit down to write a letter to parents about your screening efforts, or a referral letter, or develop a form for documenting your results, check out what we already have here, because our goal was to have all of that. And it's free for you to download and use or adapt. So please make sure you take a look at what you'll find there. So this is our landing page, kidshearing.org. The first part of the page gives you some general information. It shows you planning resources, big picture resources, how to find an audiologist to support your efforts, which is a great idea to do. Information about screening equipment. The next category is all about accessing training. Where do you go to find resources to get training? And you'll find that we have some online training options for OAE and Pure Tone that you can access right from there. The next set of resources are screening resources, resources pertaining to preparing for screening, protocol guides and forms for what to do when a child doesn't pass, documentation forms that you can use to make sure that you're accurately documenting your screening outcomes, and that you're following that protocol in order and in the time sequence that's recommended. And then there's letters that you can download to use to share the results with parents or the healthcare providers or audiologists to whom you may be referring children. And we even have some scripts there about what to say to parents at different points in the screening or referral process. So you don't have to think of all that on your own and wonder if you're saying the right things. The next part of the website has follow-up resources. We have a tracking tool, which a lot of programs find useful for keeping track of a group of children as you're going through the screening process, knowing that some of them will be complete, some of them will be at various stages of follow-up, and you can easily find and track where each child should be, as well as monitoring the quality of programs there. And underneath that, you'll find some useful tools for developing your screening skills under monitoring program quality. So take a look at our website and put it to use. Again, kidshearing.org. So let's put all of these resources into context. And we're going to start by giving you a quick overview of the auditory system, or the hearing system. Excuse me. There are three parts to the auditory system: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear, or cochlea.
And while this is, oh, go ahead, William, sorry.
Did I skip over you? No. When sound enters the outer part of the ear, it causes the eardrum to vibrate. That movement stimulates thousands of tiny hair cells in the snail-shaped portion of the inner ear called the cochlea. From the inner ear, the sound signal is carried along special nerves to the hearing centers of the brain, and the individual experiences the sensation we call sound.
And while this is how the auditory system typically functions, there can be some exceptions. There can be temporary issues, such as a wax blockage, or fluid in the middle ear that's caused by ear infections that we might discover and get addressed during a hearing screening process. But the primary condition of a hearing screening is the functioning of that inner ear, or the cochlea, that snail-shaped portion that you see here.
Yeah, that's our primary target condition.
Now, in some instances, the sound will travel through the outer and the middle ear, but when it reaches the cochlea, or that inner snail-shaped portion, the signal may not be transmitted to the brain, resulting in what we call a sensory neural loss. Now, this condition is usually permanent. This is exactly the primary condition for which we are screening in mass screening efforts. Now, this may come as a surprise to you, but it's an important fact for you to know that sensory neural hearing loss is the most common birth defect in the United States. In fact, about 3 children in every 1,000 are born with a hearing loss, deaf or hard of hearing. Now, most newborns in the United States are now screened for hearing loss using evidence-based methods, most before even leaving the hospital. But screening during this newborn period isn't enough. The research suggests that the incidence of permanent hearing loss actually can double between birth and school age, from that 3 in 1,000 I mentioned at birth to about 6 in 1,000 by the time children enter school. So we can't only screen for hearing loss at birth then. We really need to screen throughout early childhood, because hearing loss can occur at any time. It can occur at any time as a result of illness, physical trauma, or environmental or genetic factors. Now, this is often referred to as late onset hearing loss, and that just simply means that the hearing loss was acquired after the newborn period.
Now, it's commonly understood that language development is at the heart of cognitive and social emotional development and school readiness. This drives many of the practices that we see in early childhood settings. I bet you in your role talk about language development all the time. This is why it's so important for us to realize that hearing health is at the heart of language development and about as important as language development. And yet we don't talk about hearing quite as much, do we? But if we're going to be promoting language development as a part of our commitment to school readiness, we should be equally conscientious about monitoring the status of hearing throughout this early childhood period. If hearing is compromised, then typical language development will ultimately be compromised as well. And we don't want to wait for a language delay to discover that a child has a hearing loss.
This is exactly why we see so much emphasis being placed on monitoring the status of hearing in young children. So programs like Head Start, which for years have served as models of comprehensive health and educational programs for young children and their families, they have required hearing screenings for all of their children, even before we had the excellent methods that we have now to do this. But what actually is screening? I think that's a really important question to consider. So screening can be thought of as kind of a sorting process, helping us separate the children who are at risk of having a condition from those who are far less likely to have that condition. Those in that first at-risk group then are followed with additional steps implemented by pediatric audiologists and healthcare providers to continue to refine the sorting process until we definitively identify that small group of children that actually have a hearing loss. And to be blunt, we screen because we simply can't provide a full comprehensive audiological evaluation on each and every child. Now, screening followed by appropriate audiological assessment and early intervention can just dramatically improve options and outcomes for children who are deaf and hard of hearing. When hearing loss is identified early, we can make sure then that the child has access to language. And as a result, children who are deaf and hard of hearing are just thriving in ways that used to really be rare. And by providing hearing screening, you are really part of creating these amazing and life-changing outcomes. So William and I would like to now show you or have you take a look at several examples of children with severe to profound hearing loss who had the benefits of early identification and early quality intervention. And again, these children are learning and thriving, and most of all, they're communicating.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. So these first two girls are both deaf in both ears, and they have hearing aids that they typically use. Listen to the communication that they have with one another.
Over here. We're gonna miss it. Okay. Are you guys talking? I'm skating. Whee! No, look, this is the water. She's skating on the water. Yay.
So that's pretty remarkable language for children that are considered severely deaf. All right, in this next group, the family of these children elected to use sign language as their primary mode of communication, but that gives them access to language as well. And we'll see how proficient they are as communicators. See, the idea here is access to language. And to provide access to language, we first have to know if a child who has a hearing loss of some degree has that hearing loss. And hearing screening is the first step in doing that. We'll take a look at one more example. These two boys are deaf, and they wear special technology called cochlear implants. Check these guys out.
Hey, I'm AJ. Hi, my name is Gibson. People are special in different ways. One of the things that makes me feel special is I'm deaf. I'm deaf too, and that means that your ears can't hear. AJ and I have special things to show you. They're called cochlear implants. They help us hear. Cochlear implant is a big word, so I call them CI. Hey.
So that's pretty inspiring to know that that's what we all can be a part of, in making sure that children who have compromised hearing of whatever degree can be identified and appropriate interventions provided so that they don't have a disruption in their language development that could then lead to other disruptions in their learning and growth and development. And keep in mind, I think a lot of us are aware that our vision can change over time subtly. Many of us, it has. Well, hearing is the same way. And a child can have a slow, progressive hearing loss that nobody is really aware of. And so people may start to scurry around and wonder why the child is having more and more trouble in school or acting out in ways that people don't quite understand. And hearing needs to be thought about in all of those cases. But we don't want to wait for those questions to be raised. We want to find those children before those questions are raised. And that's the reason why we do hearing screening. So we want to just make sure that all children have access to language. So Terry, take it over.
Yes, thank you, William. As we mentioned just a few moments ago, OAE and pure tone audiometry are the recommended methods that we're going to be talking about today. Just want to make a key point that the availability of OAE and pure tone screening means that it's no longer appropriate to rely solely on subjective methods that have been used in the past. And these are things such as ringing a bell behind a child's head or depending solely on caregivers' perceptions of a child's hearing. Now, don't get me wrong, observation of a child's response to sound, especially the lack of a response to sound, can be helpful, and we should pay attention to how children do or do not respond to their environment. But these sorts of observations do not constitute an actual hearing screening because they're far too crude and unreliable. And frankly, we can just do so much better than that because of our current available technology.
It's also important to note that although some healthcare providers have incorporated evidence-based hearing screening into well child visits, this is far from a standard practice, especially for children less than 4 years of age.
Yeah, that's so true, William. A lot of parents or some parents may report with a lot of certainty that their healthcare provider did perform a hearing screening. But I think it's really important to understand that, and I really can't emphasize this enough as an audiologist, that routine examinations of ears by healthcare providers should not be mistaken as hearing screenings. It's really precisely because screening isn't yet happening consistently in that context that programs like yours are adopting hearing screening practices, because there's obviously an increased recognition of the importance of monitoring hearing. And it's really just, it's so feasible now to do this in programs like yours and by people like you.
So the take-home message here is this: unless a child's health record or medical records include documentation of ear-specific hearing screening results and the screening method that was used, we should never assume a hearing screening was in fact completed.
That's right. Now, there's one other important point to remember, and it's this: while OAE and pure tone screening are highly reliable screening methods, they aren't perfect. There's really no perfect screening method out there. And that means that there may be some rare conditions that are not identified through these screenings. So whenever a parent expresses concern about a child's hearing or language development, even if they received and passed a hearing screening using one of these methods, that child should be referred for an evaluation from an audiologist.
So before we go on, let me say one more thing about newborn hearing screening results. When children enter your program or system, especially during that first year of life, always be sure, if you can, to collect their newborn hearing screening results. If the results are anything but a pass on both ears, you want to make sure the follow-up evaluations actually occurred. And if you don't see evidence of that, you want to help the family circle back to their healthcare provider to accomplish just that. If you're in a program that requires an annual hearing screening, you can use the newborn hearing screening result for the first year of the child's life if you need to, but you'd absolutely want to rescreen after that. And there's never any harm in rescreening even before that year is up either. Okay, so now let's talk about these two screening methods that we're using during early childhood. If you're responsible for children who are under 3 years of age, the recommended method is OAE, or otoacoustic emission screening, which you see here on the left. And if you're responsible for screening children 3 years of age or older, historically, pure tone audiometry has been considered the recommended method for this age group. This is that headset screening where the child raises a hand or performs a task each time they hear a sound that's presented into the earphone. You see this method here on the right.
Yes, and I just want to mention that there is growing recognition that for a variety of reasons, as common as the pure tone method has been, it may not always be the most feasible method to use with some of these younger children. Research has shown that about 20 to 25% of children in that 3 to 5-year-old age group can't be screened with this methodology. And that's because they just aren't developmentally able to follow the directions reliably. And this has really been our experience as well. In those instances, OAE screening then is the preferred method for these children.
So what that means for those of you who are concerned about screening 3 to 5-year-olds is this: at a minimum, if you're screening that age group, and if you're considering using pure tone screening, you'll also need to be equipped and prepared to do OAEs on that 20 to 25% who can't be screened with pure tones. Or alternatively, you'll need to have a means for systematically referring that 20 to 25% to audiologists who can perform the screening. And to be frank, referring that many children to an audiologist may be rather challenging to accomplish because they just don't have the bandwidth typically to do that.
And I would just say, to simplify things, more and more of us as audiologists are recommending the use of OAEs uniformly with all children 3 years of age and older, because it's quicker than pure tone screening, both to learn to do and to actually implement. And it's far more likely to be a method that will work across the board with all children in the 3 to 5 year age range, that group you'd be screening, and it's equally as effective.
So if you or your program are still undecided about what method to use primarily for that older age group, 3 and older, we encourage you to carefully review a document that we have on our website that compares OAE screening and pure tone screening for this population. I'll show you in a minute where that is. Also, you'll want to check out any state regulations that might have a bearing on what you can do. There are a few states that we are aware of that might have some requirements about what methods can be used with each age group. And you'll want to check out with your newborn hearing screening program if you're in one of those states.
Yes, thank you, William.
So Terry, let's talk about OAE screening.
Yeah, let's start there. So as we said, OAE screening is the recommended hearing screening method for birth to 3 years of age. And you see this being depicted in the photos here on your screen. So if you're serving children birth to 3, again, OAE is the one and only evidence-based method recommended by the American Academy of Audiology and the American Speech Language Hearing Association, which is also known as ASHA.
OAE screening is the most appropriate method to identify young children at risk for permanent hearing loss because it's accurate and it's feasible. It doesn't require a behavioral response from the child, thus allowing us to screen children under 3 years of age. It's quick and easy. Most children can be screened in just a minute or two, sometimes in as little as 30 seconds per ear. Now that's after you've gotten comfortable, you've been trained, and you've had some practice, but it should be relatively quick and easy. It's a flexible tool that allows us to screen in a wide variety of environments, including classrooms, homes, or healthcare settings. You don't have to go into an unfamiliar room that's silent with children. You can screen in a lot of natural settings. You can go right to where the children already are.
Yeah, thank you, William. And I just wanted to say, I think most importantly of all, it's effective in identifying children who may have a mild hearing loss or a loss in just one ear, as well as those who have a severe bilateral or a hearing loss in both ears. In addition, it can be helpful in drawing attention to a broader range of hearing health conditions that may need further medical attention. OAE screening can also help to identify children who have a temporary hearing loss as the result of middle ear infections. Although this is not the primary goal of OAE hearing screening, it's definitely an additional benefit of screening with this method.
So take a look at these photos for a second here. These children are all being screened using the OAE method, and you'll notice a variety of things. I mean, what do you notice about where they're being screened? They aren't being pulled out into a foreign environment. They're being screened in everyday educational home and healthcare environments where the children are already happily spending their time. And those who are doing the screening are often people they already know. They're teachers, home visitors, health specialists. So it's a lot of adaptability.
In fact, the screening works best when children are familiar and comfortable with the adult doing the screening, and where they can play with a toy, they can be held, or even sleep while the screening is being conducted. Now, to conduct an OAE screening, we first want to take a thorough look at the outer part of the ear. We want to make sure that there's no visible signs of infection or blockage. And then we take a small probe on which a disposable cover has been placed, and then we insert that into the ear canal. And that probe delivers a low volume or quiet sound stimulus into the ear. And a cochlea, or remember that inner snail-shaped portion of the ear, a cochlea that is functioning normally will respond to this sound by sending the signal to the brain while also producing an acoustic emission. And you can see it coming back out, that little pink arrow. This emission is analyzed by the screening unit, and in approximately 30 seconds or so, the result appears as either a pass or as a refer. Now, every normal, healthy inner ear produces an emission that can be recorded in this way.
So let me show you an actual real-time screening of a child being screened using OAEs.
Are you ready? Okay, let me see.
So that probe is being put in the little boy's ear, and the screener pushed one button to get started.
Well, thank you.
And that clapping means the screening was complete. They got either a pass or a refer.
Are you ready? Ready?
Now they're doing the other ear.
You already did it.
And they got a result. I mean, that's an ideal scenario, but that is what we're aiming for, to be able to screen children that well. And like many skillful tasks, competent screeners can make it look easy. And it often is easy once you've been trained and have had a little practice. To assist screeners in keeping all of the different steps of the screening process in mind, we have a variety of resources, including the screening skills checklist you see on your screen here. It's around those skills that the training that you'll find through our website has been built, so that you can end up having that much success with most of the children that you screen. So you'll want to check that out. Now, as we've said, evidence-based hearing screening is more than just using a designated piece of equipment. So you want to make sure that you do, in fact, get that training. The equipment costs about $3,800 right now for a piece of equipment. And along with that, there are disposable probe covers, which sell between $1 and $1.50 each. So those are expensive. And we realize that those are things you would have to budget for or seek additional funding for. We know that in Head Start, hearing screening equipment and supplies are considered an allowable expense. But we've got additional resources on our website under equipment that will help you look at the availability of different brands of equipment and make sure that you can make a good selection. Keep in mind that those that sell equipment are not going to be able to be your trainer. They can introduce you to the features of the equipment, just like a car salesman can acquaint you with the various buttons and features of a new car, but they're not going to teach you to drive. And a a hearing screening equipment salesman is not going to give you the training that you need to develop your hearing screening program. So that's why we encourage you to look at the training available through our website or through local audiologists in your area, or a combination of those as you move forward. So that's OAE screening. Now let's just turn our attention briefly to the pure tone screening method. This is for 3 to 5 year olds. It's never recommended for children under 3. So keep that in mind. You probably recognize the pure tone method either because you've already used it, or it may be something that you've had your own ear screened this way. In this procedure, musical note-like tones are presented to children through headphones, and children are provided with a way to make a behavioral response. They are taught to raise a hand or otherwise to indicate that they've heard the tones. Pure tone screening gives us a good idea of the functioning of the entire auditory system, all the way to the brain, with the child telling us by a physical action that they've perceived the sound. Pure tone screening equipment costs about $800 to $1,000. And like OAE equipment, it's durable and should last a long time. And a wide range of individuals can be trained to perform pure tone screening.
So let's talk about how to conduct it. So just like OAE screening, we're going to first take a look at the ear to make sure there's no visible sign of infection or blockage. Again, just like we were doing prior to OAE screening. Now, if the ear appears normal, then the screener will then instruct or condition the child on how to listen for a tone, and then respond when they hear that tone by raising a hand or placing a toy in a bucket. Now, this step can take some time because we need to be sure the child is able to reliably complete the screening task. Once the screener has observed that the child can reliably respond to the sounds that are presented, just like they were instructed, that's the point that the actual screening starts. Now, during the actual screening process, this listen and respond game is repeated at least twice at 3 different pitches in each ear. And then we note the child's response or lack of response after each tone is presented. If the child responds appropriately and consistently to the range of tones presented to each ear, then the child passes the screening.
2 especially notable ways that pure tone screening differs from OAE screening is that the process requires children not only to be cooperative, but to be full participants in the process, following directions and responding reliably. As we mentioned, that means completing that initial process that we call conditioning or teaching the child, and carefully determining whether you're getting reliable responses from them before even attempting to do the actual screening.
That's right. And then the other difference, I guess, between pure tone and OAE screening is that the screening itself is not automated like OAE screening is. Instead, in pure tone screening, you as the screener will have to manually step through the presentation of each tone multiple times for each ear and then record the response. Then, following a very specific protocol, you as the screener will determine whether the ear has passed or not. As you might imagine or recognize with pure tone screening, there's considerably more potential for screener error in producing inaccurate results. And so that's why it's really important for thorough training and oversight to make sure all the screeners are adhering to the prescribed screening protocol. We really can't emphasize enough the importance of training and periodic oversight, as even some of the most experienced screeners can make errors that could inadvertently invalidate screenings in ways that they may not even be aware of. Now, if you look here, you should see we have an example of the actual screening steps that need to be documented for each ear as you screen. So through the training process, you'll learn all of the steps of the conditioning and the screening process, and then all of the environmental conditions that we need to monitor and need to be met as you complete a child's screening. And then again, based on those results, the screener will determine if each ear passes or not. The device itself won't produce that result, as is the case with OAE screening.
As is true for the OAE method, we've got lots of resources on kidshearing.org, including a screening skills checklist and an online directions to an online training process. So check out all of those resources that we have there. So we want to have some time for questions. The question that everybody always wants to know about is, what do you do when a child doesn't pass? And so the training process that you will need to have should address this question in detail. Basically, we follow this protocol where we have 100% of the children receiving the initial screening, and we expect about 75% will pass on both ears and will not need any further follow-up. That leaves about 25% that will not pass on both ears. And so those children will need a second screening within 2 weeks. About 8% of the total children screened will not pass the second screening and will need to be referred to a healthcare provider for a middle ear evaluation. Once any middle ear problems have been resolved and medical clearance has been given, you'll then screen that small number of children a third time. We expect about less than 1% of the total number to still not pass, but those are the children that are then referred for a complete audiological evaluation. So although a small subset of children will indeed need follow-up referral, we've found over hundreds and hundreds of implementations of this across many different program settings, that this is a doable protocol that helps children get the medical and audiological attention that they need, while at the same time minimizing unnecessary referrals to healthcare providers. Once you're underway with your screening, you want to check these percentages and see if you're getting similar pass and refer percentages.
William, let me interject here that if you find that your pass and refer percentages are significantly different than what you see here, than what we would anticipate at any point in the protocol, then you may want to ask for technical assistance. This gives you a really good benchmark to compare your program against.
Yep. This is just another overview of the protocol that you'll find on our website, and that you can walk through with some of the accompanying text. Be assured that all of these resources and this protocol is not something that you have to commit to memory, though you probably will over time. All of this is spelled out in the resources that we have on our website. And let me just give you a quick look again at kidshearing.org. The planning resources are right here. If you need to find an audiologist, you see the Find an Audiologist button right there, and click on that. If you want to find out about state regulations related to screening, what methods you can use for different age groups, you click on that Find an Audiologist button, and it'll show you how to find your state's early hearing detection and intervention program. Equipment information is next on that list. In the next group, that's where you access training. In the next, you'll find all of the resources we've been referring to once you're ready to actually start screening. Letters to parents explaining your screening program. Letters to healthcare providers explaining your screening program. The protocol, with descriptions of how to follow that protocol, documentation forms that reflect that protocol so that you're walking through it step by step. letters when you need to refer a child, letters to parents, letters to audiologists or healthcare providers, and scripts for you to talk to parents at different points in the process so you're assured to say the right thing and not overspeak. Lastly, follow-up resources. Our tracking tool that I mentioned at the beginning for tracking a group of children, and then a variety of other resources to help monitor the quality of your program. Now, if you're in a Head Start program, you can access some resources from the Head Start Center on Health, Behavioral Health, and Safety. And that's where there's the link to that website. But let's take your questions now. And keep in mind these children that we saw earlier. These are our goals. We want to all play a role in helping children who have any degree of compromise to their hearing have access to language so that they can thrive, so that they can learn without frustration, so that people can understand what their challenges are and make sure that they're not misinterpreting a hearing loss as being some other kind of condition. And the only way to do that is to make sure we have a clear picture of a child's hearing status. So we have a first question here. If a child is already being followed by an audiologist, do we need to screen? Terry, you want to give comment on?
Thank you. Really appreciate that question. No, we don't need to screen. That child should be under their care, and we just want to ensure that we're documenting that ongoing care, that they are truly under the care and being followed.
Yeah. The only time I've ever seen programs do that is just to make sure the child is feeling included, because we try to make screening a fun process that the children want to be involved with. We call it a listening game. And so we don't want to leave anybody out. And so that would be the only reason that we would think of, is just to make sure that it's an inclusive process. The next question is, are OAEs normed on children ages 3 to 5? Terry?
Yeah, their OAEs are normed throughout the lifespan by this time with just a magnificently large amount of data and research. And they have great use and utility across the age span. So the short answer is yes.
Yeah. We have a comment that someone found these children to be nothing short of miraculous. You know, that I get where you're coming from, but you know what? It's actually more normal than miraculous, which is what is so miraculous, I guess, that we can now achieve these kinds of outcomes for children who are deaf or hard of hearing if we implement hearing screening practices in a timely way so that children don't go for long periods of time without their hearing loss being identified. So Terry, what about, oh, go ahead, Terry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I actually appreciate both of you remarking on that, because it is miraculous. And the wonderful thing is that we can now expect those kind of outcomes for most children that we identify early. So thank you. There's another question that says, can you screen a child while sleeping? And I'll shout yes. That's absolutely a wonderful time to screen. And I've done it many, many times. In fact, it's a strategy I will use if I know I may have trouble screening them when they're awake.
You know, the next question speaks to the question of, are there any other recommended alternatives to OAE and pure tone screening? And in this question, do we all use speech reception or picture identification in place of pure tone screening?
Yeah, those are, methods that have been devised or been under development research and have been available. However, the recommended method is pure tone audiometry as we presented today, and not these other alternative types of audiometry.
let's see it. We have a minute for a few more questions if there are any others. In a moment, we are going to be putting up a link in the chat, and that will take you to a short evaluation of today's webinar, as well as will generate for you a certificate of attendance at today's webinar. So be sure to check that out before you leave us. There is Gunnar, our assistant here, has just posted that. It's a real pleasure having had your attention for the last hour to share the latest that we have around hearing screening and follow-up. Now, remember that the most important thing from today is kidshearing.org. And so I'm going to just advance there and remind you that that is our main resource. So if you go there, you will find all of the resources that you need to go forward from the point where you left off in today's webinar. If there are some of you who have more advanced questions, if you scroll up in the chat, you'll see the link to the webinar that we did last week on advanced screening. So you'll find that there in the chat. It says Advanced Users of Evidence-Based Screening Webinar. So you'll find that there. I think we can answer this question from Susan Terry. How do you calm a child that is upset and refuses to let the nurse touch a child's ear? I mean, that's exactly one of the things that is involved in the training process for sure. But Terry, give us a preview of what things that people might get from the training, and addressing this is one of those.
Yeah, screening difficult to screen children, or situations that are difficult, is really an area that we know that takes some skill development and alternative strategies. One thing I would just mention up front is that when a child is upset is probably not a great time to continue. Let them calm down. And one of the strategies we could use is if they are if they're a nursing child, for example, we could feed them and we can attempt to screen. And as we know, it can be difficult while they're crying, but the machine will keep trying, and it will often, we're able to get a complete screening in between when they relax or in between sucking sessions. We can also try to feed them something. We can screen during nap time or sleeping. We could take some time to get them accustomed to the machine and touching the probe. And we always stop short of screening until they're accustomed to that. We can also screen them in a group setting where they see, and we purposefully screen children that will be successful at. We can create some group acceptance and also maybe even some anticipation to take their turn. So a variety of things. And actually, William, this is making me wonder if one of our webinars on difficult screening situations is still up.
Yep, it is. And we have a lot of those resources on our website. So go and look at kidshearing.org and you'll see lots of different screening scenarios.
Thank you.
As we get ready to go, two other questions come up. In the natural environment, is there a certain requirement for relative quiet? Each device, it has different levels of sensitivity. You will learn as you go how quiet the environment needs to be in order for the screening process to progress. And again, that is something that is addressed as a part of the training.
Hey, William, could I just say that the machines are set to get a certain strength of emission over the background noise. And so if we get a good passing result, it was able to do that over the noise in the background, and you can feel confident in that.
Yep. For those of you who have multiple people gathered around your computer today, cut and paste the link for generating the certificate, and you can do it multiple times for different individuals. There's no problem with that. This webinar has been recorded. So if you want to review this information again or refer people who weren't able to attend today to this, go to kidshearing.org under the webinars header in the next couple of days, and you'll find this recording where you'll be able to look back through each of our slides and view it again. So we're at the top of the hour. A big thanks to our captioner today, to Gunnar for your support, and Terry, as always, to your expertise and partnership with us. If we can be of any further assistance, always know that we're contactable through our website, as well as directly through this email address. And we hope to hear from you. Thank you, everyone.